Good morning. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Hold on. Pardon the lateness. Pardon the no broadcast for the past 2 days. You know how clown worldy this place has all gotten. You actually can't buy internet anymore, believe it or not. I had a technician here and I was saying, let me just buy new internet. They couldn't figure it out. 2 days. 2 days. Unbelievable. But anyway, and then so many people trying to show up at the house to get stuff fixed because I keep abandoning ship to go to Vermont whenever something goes wrong here in Montreal. I got this place to not have as many headaches because I got a million headaches over at the other place. And anyway, there you go. Just nothing happening. So fixing stuff and doing our best and all the other stuff. But you're not here for those kinds of boring things, right? You're here to say some good mornings and, of course, to acknowledge a beautiful sunrise, right? The sun is up, guys, and Bitcoin's running. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Well, I'm glad to see you all. T-Dog, Yo-Yo, Rickster, Swickster, Ben. We got a P-Man van here. Must be E-Box. No, it was Bell. It was Bell. They're no good. Bell is like the thing in Canada for high-speed internet, but it's a bunch of crap. King Mansa Musa, how's it going? Morning from Florida where the sun shines as bright as Bitcoin. There you go. There you go. Tommy in the house. Excellent. Nice to see you, Tommy. All right, now let's get some Moscow time. With a couple days delay, of course, we have amazing ones, right? We've got some of the best Moscow times you're ever going to hear in the history of Moscow time. Right? So here's one from the UN. This is what they're saying about all this global warming. The UN chief says the era of global warming has ended. Everyone, get your new talking points. We are now in the era of global boiling, all right? That's the UN. We're in global boiling. So it's not climate change. They went from global warming and then they're like, no, it's actually climate change, but they're going to go with the full global boiling now, okay? So Antonio Guterres or something from the UN. Listen to him. CNN with a little culinary advice, right? We love CNN's culinary advice, right? Here's what they're saying. Tokyo's insect restaurant brings water bug cider to the table. While some consumers think eating insects is just gross, Japan has a rich culinary history of insects as food. It's the silkworms, the bundegi, as we say in Korea, bundegi, and it's disgusting. You can smell them boiling this stuff all the time, the silkworms. Yikes! But you know, it's true. Some people eat insects, right? I'm not recommending it to you. People tried to feed those things to me in Korea. They're like street food. Never happened, right? Now I'm all for Korean street food. I actually made crab broth the other day, which was a favorite of mine when I lived in Korea. Take a little cup of crab broth right for yourself in Korea. It's a good time. All right, now heat waves, right? We got some heat wave warnings. This is from the New York Post. Heart attack death risk can double during heat waves. High pollution study. So that's what's going on with the high pollution stuff. And New York Post with some more health advice, right? So CNN had some health advice on the bugs. New York Post with this advice: plant-based milks are not nutritionally equal to cow's milk. Good news. Good news. I don't know why I included that one. I thought it said it did. Well, that was a mistake, guys. That one was I had read it as plant-based milks are nutritionally equal. So it's not exactly Moscow time. So sorry about that one. I must have had a dyslexic moment. But this one certainly is Moscow time. This is from Bloomberg. And those El Salvador ones, they're becoming their own subgenre, right? We've got the RFK attack ad subgenre, right? We've talked about the RFK attack ad. That there's the Trump subgenre always, right? But here's the El Salvador one. El Salvador gets its own subgenre of democracy and all that stuff, right? So here's Bloomberg. El Salvador's iron fist on crime will crush Latin American democracy. Instead of resorting to mass incarceration, policymakers need to fight crime in ways that uphold justice, transparency, and accountability. And while they do that, you can just go on dying, right? So, We need to let the criminals free. We got to hear their case. We got to hear their point of view. Why'd you get the face tattoos, right? Why'd you tattoo gang numbers, gangs on your face, right? And here's my favorite one of the day. This is from Business Insider. And you got to give them a lot of credit for the chutzpah, for the balls to do this, right? It's amazing. A lot of people talking about it today. It's our good friend SBF, right? So the Department of Justice drops campaign finance charges against Dem megadonor, alleged fraudster. That's it. That's the whole quote, right? New York Times had one too. Federal prosecutors pursuing the criminal case against the cryptocurrency mogul Sam Bankman-Fried said on Wednesday that they were dropping a charge that he violated campaign finance rules, right? That's too bad. Glenn Greenwald came out with congratulations right away. Glenn Greenwald comes out and says, congrats to Sam Bankman-Fried, the Dem Party's second largest donor behind George Soros, on having his campaign finance fraud charges dropped by the Biden DOJ. Their hilarious claim is that they just couldn't proceed because the big, powerful Bahamas wouldn't let them. The U.S. is famous for heeding the commands and wishes of small and powerless governments like the Bahamas. So once the Bahamians said that they didn't want the DOJ proceeding with this campaign finance charge because it wasn't part of the extradition, the U.S. had no choice but to obey. Come on, we can't do anything here. Bahamas said, no, we can't do anything. The Bahamas said, no, they tied our hands. Our hands are tied. Our hands are tied. It was like the guy yesterday trying to hook up my internet, right? I know I'm the technician, but my hands are tied. I can't do anything, right? I didn't get permission. So that's the trouble I had yesterday. My hands are tied. It's more of these hands are tied things. So indeed, yesterday we had the SBF story, right? And it makes me wonder how much sort of everything in the news is about protecting the Bidens and protecting the crime syndicate running America. And that's why today's theme is 2024. So we're talking about elections. We're talking about what's going on in the next year. And so today the theme is 2024 is about 1964 so that we're not 1984. And what I mean by all that is we've got the federal elections coming up in 2024. We're talking about all these issues. And then the 1964 piece, of course, is the year after JFK was assassinated, the year in which I've been predicting for a long time we're going to be talking more and more about, because the story of Bitcoin actually goes back to 1964. I've mentioned it several times here. We talk about what happened in 1971 regularly, right? It's a wonderful Twitter handle, what happened in 1971. Of course, 1971 being the gold date, right? The date at which the US Federal Reserve was decoupled from the gold back dollar, and that fiat became absolutely free floating based on the reputation and energy, let's say, of the United States of America. That's the beginning of the petrodollar era. That is the beginning of realignment in global finance, and really the start of Wall Street and the financial engineers becoming the highest paid people of this generation and some of the most influential. And so we're dealing with all the repercussions of 1964. And what happened in that year, really, I think, is that by installing LBJ as the president, and with what happened to Kennedy, almost everything we understood about America began to change. And so when I first started predicting that RFK would have a major role in the 2024 election, it was simply because I had no idea about Bitcoin or his campaign abilities. And indeed, he's becoming the greatest campaigner I've seen anyway, since, and Vivek is up there too. Weirdly, Vivek and RFK are two of the greatest campaigners I've seen in politics in many, many years, as good as Trump, as good as Clinton, as good as any of these people. And there's a real energy about both campaigns. So I had no idea he was going to be. So Tommy is saying 1963. Indeed, 1963 is when JFK was assassinated at the very end of the year. But everything plays out in 1964. The Warren Commission, which was headed up by Gerald Ford, who was a congressman who ended up being the vice president under Nixon and helped perpetuate a lot of this stuff. So indeed, he was killed at the very end of 1963. But of course, we're moving into, it was just before Thanksgiving. So if you follow the American sort of agenda here, the calendar, right? It went from Kennedy assassinated, and then you're kind of in, kind of a liminal space, let's say, for the rest of the year until the holidays passed. And 1964 got off to a huge start. 1964, by the way, not just in terms of what happened with the CIA and the national security apparatus becoming in control of America. What we also saw in 1964 was the arrival of the Beatles, the mini skirt, for example. All kinds of things started to really happen in 1964. The 1960s, as you understand them in popular culture, really only get started in 64. Everything before that was different. You can even start to see where and this was just from the Joe Rogan episode with Mark Andreessen, talking about how the original anti-war movement pre-1964 and the Laurel Canyon and MK Ultra involvement in the psychological operations of Persuasion and all that stuff, when that started. Before that, the anti-war movement in America was sort of clean cut, patriotic, wholesome, let's say, protest. And what Mark Andreessen was saying with Joe Rogan on the show when he was on this week was exactly that the hippie movement, the drugs, the free sex, the all that stuff was actually a way to pollute the well, was a way to manipulate the hippie movement or the anti-war movement by injecting it with hippies in order to divide America in new ways so that they wouldn't coalesce around anti-war and ask too many questions about what happened to JFK. So all that to say, the theme today is this 2024 is going to be all about going back to 64 so that we're not in 1984. And Scott Adams had a really interesting, so you can, all this stuff that happened yesterday before we just get into it. It looks like they're going to indict Trump again, and they got his his pool cleaner. His pool cleaner's got caught up in it now because I guess he moved boxes because of a leak or something. So he's going to get in trouble. We've got the story around Hunter Biden, of course, right? The plea deal that fell apart. We saw that in the past couple of days. It looks like it was completely insane from the start, and it looks like he's still going to get a form of plea deal. It'll just be a slightly stronger slap on the wrist. But here's what I'm seeing, and I'm going to make a big prediction with this, right? So let me read the frame that we're seeing here. And this comes from Scott Adams Says, right? So Scott Adams said the following: I sometimes see the world as a secret battle among persuasion wizards, sort of like the movie Underworld, in which the vampires and werewolves are waging a war that humans don't notice. I've mentioned before the Harry Potter wars, right? The wizarding wars that the muggles, the humans just aren't aware of, right? It's sort of beyond their vision. This is another frame that looks very similar. He says, when Democrats succeeded in persuading half of the republic that Republicans staged an insurrection and didn't bring guns, we entered a whole new realm. As a hypnotist, so if you didn't know this, Scott Adams is a hypnotist, a trained hypnotist. As a hypnotist, if I had been on the team that pulled that off, I would have one big question. I'd want to know if there was any limit to what you could sell to half of the public that votes for Democrats. I would want to test it. And to test it, I would want to introduce the news cycle. I would introduce to the news cycle a whistleblower with the most implausible story I could imagine. Yep. I would plant a story that the US has multiple captured alien ships and even some dead aliens. And I would ask you to accept that these aliens routinely navigate the vastness of space and crash mostly in America. If half of the republic believes that story, the country is ripe for a takeover from within without firing a shot. As a hypnotist, that's how I test the subject to see if they are in a fully suggestible state. I'd suggest something absurd, such as one arm becoming weightless. Using the underworld filter, to me, it looks like, using underworld filter, to me, it looks like a master persuader is doing a hypnotic induction on the public via control of the Democrats' bubble of social media and news. All of the elements of induction are present. I don't hold any filter on reality to be true, but some filters seem to predict better than others, and that might be worth something. The filter predicts that the next suggestion that comes packaged as news will be another escalation of absurdity and or the takeover play. So what he's basically saying here, and here's a quote that someone threw in, a guy named Clint Nolan, so he's got the same name as me, and it's a quote from Robert Anton Wilson. The world is, in many respects, a circus with rival gangs of hypnotists trying to hypnotize one another. So what he's saying here is the next suggestion is going to be a big one, and it's going to be part of a takeover bid or a way to really get a new sort of division between American people, just like that hippie thing that we mentioned just now, right? Where you had a sort of credible anti-war movement, and then it was manipulated and turned into something completely different that divided Americans in completely new ways, not about war or violence or anything like that, but about patriotism and how much respect do you have for your elders, and how, what do you do this and what do you do that? How do you do this and how do you do that? So what he's saying here is that some other suggestion is about to come, some other story, in the same way that the hippie movement was injected into the anti-war movement in order to change the script, in order to change the story, in order to change the reel, the movie, whatever you want to call it. That whole frame, right? We're seeing it now. So the aliens thing doesn't look like it's going to work. That dog ain't going to hunt, right? No one's buying this aliens thing, right? It's kind of silly. Everyone, when they said in the hearings, well, there was non-human biologics. Well, that's like a dandelion as a non-human biologic could have crashed into some flowers, right? That would be non-human. He would still be correct. And of course, there's tons of stories from the 1950s where mutant human beings, for example, deformed and very sick human beings, some human beings purposely deformed, were put into contraptions and sent and crashed into America in the same way that other propaganda was conducted. It was just a diversion. It was other countries putting in, effed up animals and all kinds of different mutant creations that were, who knows, being created where, and were maybe human and maybe not, who knows. So they would hope that someone who recovered the crashed vehicle would say, oh, it's an alien. It was really like a deformed monkey or something, right? So there's plenty of cases of that, and I think some documented ones, and but I'm not sure about those, but you could imagine that would be the possibility. But here's what I'm going to predict, and I don't see any other way out of it at this point, right? I don't see any other way out of it at this point. So here's what I think is about to happen. Now, I'm taking a chance here and predicting it's the summertime, right? I could be completely wrong. This is sort of a summertime prediction, slow news in some ways, but a lot of news is happening. But here's what I think is going to happen with all of the legal troubles, with the Hunter Biden thing, with the news changing its point of view. I think Biden's days are numbered. He might pass away peacefully in his sleep or something like that. But I think he's going to get Kennedy'd. That's where I see this headed right now, because you can't actually have him up there any longer, sort of trying to prop this thing and keep it going forward. I don't think Biden was the major player in all of this stuff. I think he knows a lot of dirt. I don't think they can just bury him today and expect everything to be fine. But he might just peacefully pass in his sleep and this and that. And so where would that leave America? Well, we would be having pretty interesting conversations about the succession, Kamala Harris. We've already seen one election completely altered because of the pandemic. Some people think, and if you read between the lines, if you read what War Clandestine says, if you read what some of these other people, we don't know, but it looks like the pandemic, as it grew around the 2020 election, was conveniently placed in order to change election mechanics, in order to change the system. And even if you go back further, of course, remember what Trump was impeached for the second time the first impeachment. Sorry, I always forget which one. The order of his impeachments is hard to keep track of sometimes. So the first impeachment was exactly about the perfect phone call with Zelensky, right? And then all of a sudden, the calls about what the Bidens are doing in Ukraine turn immediately into an impeachment inquiry, and then war right after the pandemic fades, right? So the pandemic comes in as they're impeaching Trump, and then the questions about Ukraine disappear until the election is over, where you get the new president and the new war. So look, we don't know what's going on exactly, but my prediction is Biden is not going to make it much longer. There's only a few plays left with this guy. I don't think he's capable of running in another election. And you can't really just retire him, right? You can't retire him. Now, the good news is, you, I think, are going to have a lot of questions if he does pass peacefully in his sleep, right? There's going to be a lot of questions, which is why I think it's so important that we now actually get to the bottom of what 1964 was all about, right? Now, you can take away the assassinations for a minute, right? And we're going to learn more about the assassinations, but just think about what actually happened in 1964. That's the moment the banks become deputized in order to do the government's bidding. That's the moment the banks enter the space of the public sphere as a public utility, let's say, in a sense. Now, it used to be the banks would never listen to anyone from government. It was just 15 years ago that people laughed at the idea of ID for a brokerage account, right? That was seen as insane around 2008, not even long ago. And if you go back further, of course, having all of your financial transactions monitored, everything had to do with 1964. Bank Secrecy Act begins then. The ability of the government to tap a bank on the shoulder to look into funds, look into money, look into what people are doing begins in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. And this is exactly why I started talking about RFK to begin with. And in my brief conversation I had with RFK in Miami, it was about this 1964 case. I said, I think you're going to win, not because I knew anything about you, simply because the narrative is suggesting that 2024 is going to be all about 1964, that the story has to go back to what happened to his father. And weirdly, yesterday, we had an interesting tweet thread from RFK himself about banks in this line. He says, banks are not only businesses, they are caretakers of the payment system, which is a systemic public good. Much like a utility. Utilities cannot cut off your water or sewer or electricity because of your political beliefs. The Fed and Treasury recognize the systemic importance of the payment system, which is why they don't simply let banks go bankrupt, but administer bank failures with great care and do their best to keep banks afloat in case of a liquidity crisis. This amounts to a kind of indirect subsidy. In exchange for it, banks have a duty to serve the public. Banks and payment platforms should not act as instruments of extra legal punishment and intimidation of dissidents. Banks that freeze or cancel accounts without due process should lose their special protections, including access to the Fed's discount window and eligibility for federal deposit insurance. Since the Fed is nominally independent, it will take courageous members of Congress to challenge the Fed on this issue. So that's not going to happen, right? Nick Carter says something similar. He's right. Banks are extensions of the state and as much must serve all comers equally. The fact that anyone pretends otherwise is completely absurd. So this is Nick Carter. I would accept a trade-off whereby the state no longer charters banks and they are therefore allowed to exercise political discretion in whom they serve. Because at that point, new banks could be created to serve excluded industries. Right now, it's the worst of both worlds. Banks are entirely politicized and no new charters are being granted. So if you start putting your predictive lens on to what's going on with this bank issue, if we do open up the wound of the JFK thing, and I think that a Biden assassination would pretty much do it, right? We would find out what's going on. In a sense, there would be more people asking questions because that tends to be what we're seeing happen, right? More and more, the NPC tribe of people who listen to Moscow Time and don't know it's fake, and the people who are, wondering, well, if Biden can just tackle global warming, we're going to have a better future, right? This group of people is shrinking every single day. Every new story about Hunter Biden, every instance of political persuasion takes a few members of this rump off, right? So it's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because it's based on NPCs anyway. And once NPCs don't have the new talking points, or once the talking points lead them to too much cognitive dissonance, they ignore it, they abandon it, they do something else. And that seems to be what's happening. You're getting more and more people sort of waking up and asking questions. And I think if there was another assassination, which is what I'm actually predicting is going to happen, and I don't think Biden's making it to the end of the summer. I think he's old enough. You're going to try and get this news story out there where it's like, oh, peacefully in his sleep, he hasn't been doing so well. Not a big surprise, right? But people are going to ask questions. Now, I don't know if you're ever going to prove what happened to him, but nevertheless, it's going to create more and more of an appetite for the truth, right? Because that's what we have here. It's the nature abhors a vacuum argument, and more people are saying that doesn't actually explain it. So you're going to have more and more people coming to this conclusion and thinking about things in this way. Now, when we think of the capacity of the United States as a country to deal with this, it's not looking good, right? We've got Facebook. This is Jim Jordan and everyone talking about the Facebook files now, right? So just like the Twitter files, there's now all kinds of smoking gun proof about how heavily the government leaned on Facebook in order to get talking points out around COVID, around the vaccines, and all of this stuff. So, and of course, the Hunter Biden laptop, right? Can't forget that one, which we now know the FBI knew was legitimate and nevertheless went ahead with their suppression of the information. So we've got a Facebook files thing coming in, and that looks exactly like the bank thing. That's another deputization instrument, right? Anytime they are turning these public services into quasi judicial bodies that react to government prompts that are being engineered by the prompts coming from government, we have a imbalance of power and a system not running the way it was intended. These are not the normal checks and balances. These are not the orchestration of the characters on stage are not the way any American expects to see the show play out or designed the show to play out, right? So it's not happening the way anyone imagines. So the point is with something like Facebook and the Facebook files, with something like this bank question now becoming more and more obvious that they are functioning as quasi arms of the state, as a quasi judicial body whenever they debank someone or don't give someone any services. So you're going to start to see more and more of that. And the idea here being that, of course, Bitcoin forces the conversation about the separation of money and state. And when I think of 1964, and when I think of what we're talking about, which is the deputization of the banks beginning in 1964, and now the deputization of Facebook and the deputization of Twitter in a previous regime, and the deputization of Instagram through Facebook, and the deputization of Google, and some people might say the deputization of Hollywood and mainstream media in order to keep the narrative going forward and to keep the hypnosis engaged. That whole thing, right? That whole thing, because of Bitcoin, really starts to become easy to talk about and clear. That's the difference. It was very difficult to articulate the separation of money and state before Bitcoin because you couldn't really imagine how it would work. Like, well, how are you going to separate money? You had to invent the thing to make it possible. Right. But now that Bitcoin is here, you're able, with contrast, to see these things very clearly. Now that you have an option to separate government from money, the state from money, now that the option is clearly in front of you, you're able to see the two things contrasted in relief that you weren't able to before. And you're going to start to see Americans eschewing, that's a douche word, Americans ignoring the institutions we've built because they're not credible anymore. So, for example, with changes that we see coming, right? We're clandestine here predicting one of the only ways out of current troubles is through the UN. And he explains here, he says, the American public are starting to recognize that we are not going to get justice from the Department of Justice or Congress. What legal body could override or supersede the US government? The UN Charter, he says, international law, violations of the Biological Weapons Convention and Nuremberg Code. In the Big Five of the UN Security Council, Russia, China, US, UK, and France would agree to investigate deep state biological weapons production as part of the peace agreement deal in Ukraine, and their findings confirm Russia and China's accusations. Then the next course of action would be international military tribunal to prosecute crimes against humanity via bioweapons production. Precedent suggests it would be a team of military judges from each of the five big countries. The GOP aren't going to impeach Biden. The DOJ or another special counsel are not going to prosecute deep state actors for their crimes anytime this century. Our only shot is the military, and the most direct option to do this legally would be through international law. We already have the evidence, the paper trail, the financials, proof they tried to cover it up. All we need is Trump back in office to facilitate the deal with Ukraine, Russia, and convince the UK/France to vote with the US, Russia, and China, and then it's over. Deep state actors would be at the mercy of military tribunals, not a corrupt US DOJ or an incompetent Congress. It's the only way. He says it's the only way, right? Now, I don't know if it's the only way, and I don't like the idea of military tribunals, and none of that seems super appealing for the world Bitcoiners are trying to create. But that's not the important part here. The important part, I think anyway, is that Americans are less enthusiastic than ever that their own institutions are going to deliver them justice. That an American like this is even contemplating some international organization and a global military tribunal to bring Americans to heel is sort of a brand new way of seeing the world. It hasn't really been, now this was something that you would see on the fringes before, right? Oh, they should bring Bush to The Hague, right? They should bring war crimes against George Bush, which I agree with, right? I'm not against that, but it always seems so silly, and most Americans went, we got a justice system in America. We don't have to have this stuff, but apparently we don't. And the idea that this kind of conversation is perpetuating now in America, that you're starting to have conversations around using a military tribunal based in France and the UK and Russia and China and all that in order to get to these folks in the United States is sort of a brand new way of looking at things. And I think it's going to happen. I think what he's saying, whether it's Trump, whether it's RFK, whether it's Vivek, who continues to be just an amazing campaigner, I think that this is possible, right? And when you start to analyze, let's say, what RFK is actually saying about banks and this public utility thing, what you're doing is you're forming an argument for the separation of money and state, and you're going to start to see other state apparatuses fall and be derelict and not used anymore, like the DOJ and like these other things, simply because they're unsalvageable. And when you start getting into the funding of all of these institutions, right, the great distaste that Americans are starting to have for the electoral process because of things like Sam Bankman-Fried, because of the deputization of Facebook through the Department of Justice, through the FBI, you're going to start to get calls to defund almost all of this stuff, right? Almost all of this stuff is going to be up for reassessment. And you're going to completely redesign the federal government after this election, after the 2024 election, one way or the other, whether we have an election. That's kind of what I'm saying here, right? To me, what I'm saying here is you ain't going to get any Biden running in 2024, not because he loses a primary or anything. I don't think he can make it, and I think he's going to get silenced, and because it's just too much trouble. Now they might try I don't think Michelle Obama is going to do it anymore. I'm starting to think, no way. Gotta hide. Like, there's too much going on. I think it is going to be, what's his name? The Gavin fella from California. I could be wrong. But you're going to start having conversations, and they're going to involve a complete recalibration and re-understanding of what the federal government in the United States is. Now, is a certain portion of the population going to accept a top-down authoritarian system? I think so. I think we can clearly see there's enough Americans out there that are easily hypnotized, exactly as we've seen here, right? That it's even right now, the game isn't about what new hypnotism, what new lies should we concoct. It's let's see how gullible these people actually are, exactly what Scott Adams is saying here, right? Do I really have them completely asleep and under control? I think so. So let's try some crazy shit, right? So the crazy thing I think they're going to try is sort of what I'm getting at here, is they're just going to say, oh, Biden, oh, that sucks. He's an old fella, did his best for the country. Wow. He's a hero. Let's just leave his son alone. Let him mourn. Let him mourn, right? We don't need anything else. We don't need to burden the family with more trouble. Let him mourn. He's an old fella, right? So, and then you're going to get the same kind of crazy stuff we had in COVID, right? After a leader dies and it's mid-election or whatever, there's going to be some narrative that says, oh, blah, 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 just like there was with the vote by mail and all that stuff, right? There's some excuse to change the electoral system. Now, I'm not arguing that the votes Biden got in 2020 were cheated, right? I think he could have won based on the changes to the system legitimately. I think he could have won legitimately. If you believe the system, which had no credibility, was legitimate, that's fine, right? But I think within the incredulous system, he could have easily won. It's not impossible. Not impossible. But here we are, right? Here we are. So hold on. Let me just get back to this. So the appetite now people have that no way she's running. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm at. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm at. I think they're okay with their fortunes and don't really want the everyday fighting and hatred and being called big. I mean, how many times is she going to be called Big Mike if she runs? It's going to be Big Mike everywhere, right? Big Mike. It's one of the worst insults you'll ever hear. It's really terrible. It works. I mean, I don't like saying it, but it works, right? So yeah, I don't think it's happening. But just this idea now that the U.S. Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, and all these people are becoming so disreputable, so dirty, that Americans are going to contemplate a completely new system. And that's why you have these two big financial institutions. So this is all in the past couple days. As America and these systems are melting, as I'm predicting, there's going to be a deep state overt operation to assassinate the current president and blame it on Sleepy Joe, he's tired and old stuff. Because again, I'm only predicting because I can't see a way. If I'm part of the deep state right now, right? That's why I came up with this prediction. If I'm part of the deep state right now, and I'm sitting there saying, well, they didn't buy the alien thing. We can't keep pedaling in circles here. We got to find a way out of this Hunter Biden thing. And this is all, we're losing people. We're losing the narrative. We're losing control of what people are thinking. There's only one way out that I can see. The aliens didn't work. So what are you going to do? You got to go full Monty. You got to do it. The guy's got to go. Got to totally change the narrative. And it's what they did in 1964. Now, it's the opposite reason, right? They were after Kennedy because he was onto them. And that's where America completely changes as a country. That's where we start to see that I don't think any president since then has really been in charge. I think Kennedy was the last. I think Nixon tried. I think he tried. I think Reagan was not, the IQ wasn't quite there, right? I think he believed he was doing stuff, but he was easily controllable, obviously. Clinton probably just, what I read is he knew what the game was. He's so smart. He understood what was happening. His wife understood what was happening. She was working for the Nixon impeachment plan. These people knew what was going on. I think they jumped in 2 feet first, right? They knew how to play ball. And Bush, of course, we don't need to say too much about him. I think Obama maybe stumbled into this. I don't know, right? I can't predict. I can't mind read why Obama did some of the things he did. He's probably the least guilty of all of these people, I think. I could be completely wrong about that. But of course, Trump was president, right? It was a mistake. It wasn't part of the script. That's why the whole narrative started to unravel, which is always why, as a longtime 2015 Trump supporter, as a Bitcoiner at the time already, I said, I love Trump because he's going to change what the job of president is. He's going to change reality around the president. And it's the same reason why I did embrace Joe Biden, not for any of his politics or anything. I just thought he was so inept that it would be a better way. You could change the job of president even more by putting him in after Trump, especially with this, sketchy 2020 election. It's kind of perfect as a Bitcoiner. If your goal is the separation of money and state and to change the system, Joe Biden was the best candidate. I mean, he just was. right? He was absolutely the best candidate. It doesn't mean because he did stuff, right? It's because of how corrupt and stupid he was. And because he's so corrupt and stupid looking, he's not, I don't think he's stupid like IQ way, right? But stupid looking. Because he's stupid looking and says stupid things to cover his lies and all this stuff, right? What did he say? Oh, I never talked to my son about business. We have recordings on the phone now, right? So there's probably no way out. And the reason I'm making the prediction is if I'm a deep state guy, right? And I was running this job and I was trying to maintain narrative, I would say for the opposite reasons they did it to JFK, the opposite reasons, but the same reasons in the end, doubting how the system works, doubting the integrity of the system, the credibility of the system, right? If that's what's going on, then they're going to have to do something, right? So hey, look, you might read in 2 or 3 months, come back and watch this, and you'll say, holy shit, he called it, right? He died in his sleep, right? At the White House. Now, I could be wrong, but I just don't think he's got the horsepower anymore to keep fighting this. And they need to call in an audible here. And the audible is going to be... So, but the good news is it's going to get people talking. It's going to get people talking about what happened in 64. It's going to add more amplification to RFK. You know what they do? This is a terrible story, but it's kind of similar, right? So whenever there's a cannibal story in the world, there was a guy in Japan, all right? A guy in Japan. He was a foreign exchange student. You can go check the story out. It's unreal. It's unreal, but it's true. It's Japan in a nutshell in some ways. So there was a guy who was a student in France, and he cannibalized his girlfriend in France. It was very messy. It was very disgusting, apparently. Right? I don't want to ruin your breakfast if that's what you're doing. I'm not going to tell you more details. But then he got extradited to Japan. And in the end, in Japan, it was like a mental health thing and blah, blah, blah. So he's out. He's just out now. And whenever there's a cannibal story, they interview him. So he does like the mainstream news in Japan every time there's a cannibal story. And he's like, well, what is human? What are you? Just talk about it, right? Well, when I killed her, and then I cooked, and then it's crazy, right? So when you get assassinations like what I think is going to happen, you're going to get people who have to come and quote, and who else but the guy who has firsthand experience. His whole family was assassinated. So it's going to give RFK, another reason to talk about stuff, which is morbid, but it's true. All right. Well, that's enough bad news, kind of good news, but also bad news. But I'm going to tell you where things are headed with, in contrast to that, right? So in contrast to all that we're hearing about these awful people doing awful things, none of which makes any sense because it's so muddied by psyops and manipulation and lies and the fake nature of most of these operations and stories. In the meantime, 2 major financial institutions in the United States said things they've never said before and are in line with the crazy stuff we're talking about here this morning, right? So one of them is TD Ameritrade and the other is BlackRock. So both of them came out with research reports in the past couple of days. And both of them have some absolutely incredible things to say. Did I not take the fucking TD one? God damn it. Okay, hold on. Let me just get the TD Bank one. I've only got the BlackRock one here, though. Just give me a second. I'll get the TD one. Don't know where I put it. Okay. Here we go. There it is. Found it. So this is TD Bank's Cowen, right? TD Cowen. We believe Bitcoin could ultimately represent a superior store of value relative to all other forms of money, right? So that's one quote. Just, pretty good. But here's the other one from BlackRock. Good morning. BlackRock is telling its clients that the optimal BTC allocation is 84.9%, and the certainty equivalent compensation required to not invest in Bitcoin is 200%. So what all of this means basically is that the 60-40 bond split that it's not just that they have an ETF coming out. There's someone saying that there's nothing else to invest in. It's just Bitcoin. It's 80% of your portfolio. Forget 60-40 splits, bond, equity. None of that makes sense. He's saying it's now 84% Bitcoin and just a couple more percent otherwise. And if you read some of this stuff, right? So he's saying we suppose we start with a 60-40 equity bond portfolio, assuming that equity and bond returns are log normal, blah, 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 math, letters, finance, engineering, other stuff, exhibits. And in the end, they come up with a number which says that the best way to handle this is the optimal BTC allocation is a large 84.9%. So BlackRock needs to stop outing my portfolio. So the point here that I'm trying to get at is that, and it's what I've said from the beginning, right? Energy companies and the big banks, the major benefactors of deputization by the state from 1964 on, are starting to realize that that dog ain't going to hunt much longer, and they've got to protect themselves. And it's their selfishness and their self-interest which will help separate money and state in the way that we all wanted to see happen. So when you get the biggest portfolio managers, the biggest allocators, the biggest wealth managers, like BlackRock, this is $10 trillion under management. 10 trillion, it's 1/10 of all the money in the world that is just notionally created, right? So it would be like if all the money was already on the Bitcoin standard, they held 2 million Bitcoin, right? That's what it would be, right? They'd have 2 million of the 21 million, not that they hold themselves, but they manage for other people. Now, I'm not saying that's where we're headed. I'm saying that that's a reference to understand what's going on, which, by the way, is why Bitcoin will take over. It's the best measuring stick in the system, right? Imagine if you were able to articulate things in the economy in that way, right? Well, they have this much Bitcoin, therefore they're this influential in the economy, and that's easy to understand. Today, when you say $10 trillion under management, no one knows what that means, because what's the GDP of the world? I don't know, maybe 100 trillion? No one knows. It's impossible to know, right? It's all made up and political and cobbled together from corrupt countries after corrupt countries, America being one of them. So it's almost impossible to speak openly and clearly about that stuff. But that's changing. If you even think about the petrodollar piece. So as I said, it was in 1964 where you had the deputization of the banks, which further led to the changes which led to the petrodollar becoming the major barometer, the major measuring stick, the major reference rate for the entire global economy. Well, that's changing too. That's changing too. So at the same time the banks are changing, at the same time that TD and BlackRock are saying, this is the best money ever created, guys. We got something happening here, which would further separate money and state because they're not going to be on board anymore. As I've said for a long time, the banks didn't want the job, right? The banks didn't want this job in 1964 to look and ask for everyone's fucking license and stuff like that to open an account. They didn't want that job. They got it. They had to do it, and they got fined if they didn't. They got fined if they did it, right? It wasn't a good deal for them. So I don't think they wanted to be involved in this. So they're definitely looking for a way out. And the other one being the energy sector. And you had here Joe Manchin, right? Maybe what some people say most powerful person in the Senate, because he's a Democrat that will vote depending on what he can do for his state of West Virginia. So he'll regularly vote with Republicans. He was a good friend with Trump. And some people have said he would switch parties and blah, blah, blah. But here's what they did yesterday, and this is big news, guys. This is I got two pieces of big news related to this. This was a 96-3 vote on the U.S. Senate floor, and Chairman Joe Manchin spoke about the Senate agreeing to a 96-3 for an NDAA amendment to establish a nuclear fuel program with the purpose of onshoring nuclear fuel production and reducing dependence on Russia for enriched uranium. So basically, America getting its nuclear house in order, and this vote being a part of that. The other one was Japan yesterday started its nuclear reactors again. The first time since 2021. Japan restarts first nuclear reactor. Kansai's Takahama number 1. I used to live in Kansai, by the way. I've probably used energy from that nuclear reactor. It's Japan's oldest reactor. It's the 11th unit to restart under post-Fukushima rules. Japan's government wants nuclear to play a bigger role in the energy mix. So America coming back with nuclear, Japan coming back with nuclear, China all about nuclear. We got nuclear in UK. We got nuclear in Amsterdam, where we're going to be. Bitcoin, Amsterdam, October 12th to 13th. Going to be talking about nuclear energy. You got nuclear energy in Finland, not in Germany. Oh, poor Germans. They're still celebrating not having it. So we'll see them in the next century. So there you go. We got amazing nuclear energy news. We've got amazing news from the banks about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, its route to separating money and state goes through the energy and banking sectors. It's getting those things to not be so intertwined with nationalism, national identity, and deep state security operations, right? Extracting them from the web of Hunter Biden stuff. And because remember, Hunter Biden is an expert on both energy and natural gas and bioweapons, and that's why he was a consultant in all these places, right? It's because he was an expert. He's the smartest person, right? So there you go, guys. We got a destabilizing American mythology. Now, I'm a big believer in American exceptionalism. I think we're going to get it back. I think we're already living in it. I think getting it back isn't even the right frame. It's already here. Seeing people like Vivek, seeing people like RFK, seeing all these Bitcoiners that are just not buying this UFO thing. Like, imagine 10 years ago if the UFO thing would have come out, how susceptible people would have been. I think I would have believed it 10 years ago. I do. I think I would have been duped 10 years ago because the credibility of these people wasn't so toast. And now, because of things like Hunter Biden and what they did to Trump, and again, it's what I said about what Trump offered. Trump offered a way to completely change reality. And that's why I loved what he was doing. That's why I accepted him for who he was, a bully and all the terrible things that I understand why people don't like Trump. I get it, right? I get it. But we needed to crack that veneer. We needed to change the job of president. We needed to see that all of this stuff was fake and it could be changed that easily, just from a frame of mind. And that's why embracing Biden the way I did anyway in 2020, and it wasn't black-pilled, right? I thought it was going to be funny to have Biden around, right? And indeed it was. So, and we get Hunter as bonus, right? Hunter is just, we love Hunter, right? Hunter, Bitcoiners are going to have to build a statue to Hunter Biden one day. He was the one who really showed us that you don't have to listen to KYC and AML things, that you can do it anyway, right? You can just do it. And, you could sell art to complete scammers. You could money launder with art. You could do all those things. So I think Bitcoiners will owe a certain debt of gratitude to Hunter Biden for the separation of money and state. So we got to find a way. Maybe El Salvador makes a statue to Hunter Biden. Like maybe he's smoking some crack or something, he's just in there, right? One of these statues, maybe it's one where he's got one of the girls, and he's sort of checking out his unit when he's on them, like one of those ones they put in the Times Square where someone bought the ads. So one of these things, right? Aliens are not Bitcoin graffiti. It's always been my favorite thing about the alien stories is why do they keep liking the USA? What is it about America, right? The aliens are not to be underestimated. USA is the place to be. Yeah, I guess they're just into, like, they want to go to Disney or something. They want to get a snow cone, or they want to get some soft serve ice cream. The clown Hunter the clown. He is the clown prince. Yeah, that would be another good one, right? We should, whatever the statue is they make of Hunter, we got to talk to Bukele right away, right? He's got to get on top of this before, because I think you're going to make more. I think Bitcoiners will actually make pilgrimages to the guy, right? Who did this, right? Oh, the McDonald's drive-throughs. Yeah. Haven't heard his unit. Haven't heard that in a while. Yeah, unit. Yeah. hockey talk, I think. So anyway, whatever statue they make of Hunter, I think, Bitcoiners have to acknowledge that if it wasn't for Hunter, we would be in a totally different position when it came to understanding why we need to separate money and state, how corrupted the financial monitoring system is. If it can't catch Hunter, I mean, really, do we need to respect it? Do we need to sit here and respect this thing? Of course not, right? And that's how I've been feeling about this stuff for a while. That I made my final, let's say, mental break because of Bitcoin, that the trajectory that Bitcoin put me on. It really was at the start of COVID, right? So Trump was still president, and this is what helped me embrace the Biden change. Was I said right away, well, because I wasn't happy with how Trump was handling a lot of it already at the time. You could tell national security interests were getting involved in the response, right? In an ideal world in New York, I was in New York City for COVID, right? I am in New York City as COVID is happening. I'm there for case one and things are going crazy. And they say the 2 weeks. Okay, I'm okay with the 2 weeks, right? I didn't follow the rules. I went all over the place during those 2 weeks, but that was my own thing. After that, I said, well, this ain't going to stop at 2 weeks. We're not doing any of the things I thought we would be doing. And in order to get through this, I've decided to not get mad at anybody. I just said they're not going to get anything right. I expected zero from them. And by expecting zero from them, I also removed myself from any obligations to follow them, any feeling I had of going along with this system in order to help everybody. Any feeling of collegiality and togetherness, it was out the door. I said, nothing that they say from now on applies to me. It can apply to anyone else. They can follow the rules. I'm not going to. That was the only way to not get angry about it, right? And I promised myself I would have no moments of anger when it came to COVID lockdowns, and I didn't. I just kept getting away from their entrapments, getting away from their troubles. But that really started my attitude towards most of this stuff, which is you really just have to give yourself permission to not follow it anymore and to not be subject to these dictates, right? Once you do that, you have a different frame. And then, of course, Bitcoin helps you rebuild a sense of orientation without any of these directions or anything like that, right? Yeah. I basically chose my own mental health. Yeah. Which sounds like it sounds so basic, right? But people weren't. They were waiting for someone to do a thing, just like. Look, I love, I saw this comment on I saw this on the military tribunals here, this comment. I'll go through the comments in a second. Military tribunals are the only way. Change is needed. Look, again, I'm not putting my faith in Trump. I love Trump, but I'm not putting my faith in military tribunals and Trump. We got to get him elected. I think the very act of debating this stuff, and I think what's going to happen next to Biden is going to help do what needs to be done, the separation of money and state. So we're almost there, guys. It's coming. Health is not a centralized thing. Yeah. Jumper, DCS World. Bob Lazar was talking about aliens and crafts since 1989. No one believed it. Yeah. I mean, look, I personally, the craft story, I think they're real, obviously. But they could be previous civilizations. Right now, if we were wiped out by a giant flood, some things might resonate past our obliteration. One of them, right, maybe not this year, but in a few years, not long from now, I can imagine automated drone systems that could be triggered by anything. Now, when you saw that one of the first UFOs visit the Roswell site in New Mexico around the atomic blast, well, I mean, if you were going to automate drones and you recognize the signature of an atomic blast, well, wouldn't it make sense to for a drone to be activated, right, and go right there and check out what happened? Sure, it doesn't mean humans have to be involved. And Jumper DCS World asks, "What if aliens made Bitcoin?" Look, I do believe that the aliens as a previous civilization that may be found at Earth, totally possible. I continue to have trouble imagining two simultaneous civilizations live at the same time. I just have trouble doing that. I had a great explanation the other day, I think from you, Catacombs, about programming systems to be able to reconcile between each other. And basically, that's part of why I have trouble imagining aliens. Simulation theory stuff. So the limitations of simulation theory, but I didn't quite understand because I'm a little bit illiterate in computer programming. Yes, the layer technique. Yes, Catacombs telling me about that, the layer technique. Because now I believe you, Catacombs. I just don't have. I don't even really understand why the thing is a limitation as far as the two stories reconciling in a simulation theory world, that you can have two worlds that would somehow harmonize after. I don't know. I don't really. I've had that explained to me before. I'm not really an expert on it. Money is economic energy. Yeah. Absolutely. All about energy, DCS. All about energy. Yeah. If we made, we'd already plugged into a galactic currency. I think, we are. I think we can communicate to aliens with Bitcoin. If any of you saw the movie Contact, they use math. And why not? Why not Bitcoin? Right? You could probably send them Bitcoin and get them to understand the whole thing. CK in the house. What's up, CK? Good morning, fam. Smash the like. Indeed, we love like smashing. We love it. New South Wales, Bitcoin graffiti. What's happening, man? Smash me. Smash like fam. So fight crime in the US. Yeah. I think P-Man Van's talking about El Salvador here. Isn't it disgusting, the El Salvador things? Isn't it disgusting? Oh my God. It's better to have them around. Oh, what's this, Felipe? 1964, CIA gave a military coup in Brazil that lasted 20 years. Oh, Felipe, I didn't know that, Felipe. I didn't notice that, man. That's true. That's amazing. 60. It's all about 64, guys. 64. I like my title today. 2024 about 64. So it's not 84. Too bad it wasn't. Too bad it wasn't 11/20/22. Yeah. Between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So Tommy's talking about the cusp of revolution here. Yeah, it was the cusp. That's the date that Tommy gave of JFK's assassination. 11/22/63. Indeed, the lot of celestial stuff absolutely involved in this. Great title, JFK until this very day. Title sums up the fallout and now blowback of the great breakup happens now, and Bitcoin is its catalyst. Absolutely. Why? Again, 2024 is all about Bitcoin for these reasons. It's the only way to make all of this stuff simple. Because really, is every American going to figure out like Hunter and the Department of Justice and what happened? You need a simple story. And the simple story is the money was corrupted. And the corruption of the money affected the entire system to the point that we didn't have anything like democracy. And in fact, democracy was turned into narrative building and mythology in order to perpetuate the system that had already controlled the money. So the money had already eaten the state by the time the brainwashing began and the hypnotism began. So there you go. V says he had a dream about Harry Potter last night. Well, dreams are important. Dreams are important. I'm not a big dreamer, by the way. I dream a lot in the day. That hypnotist story is showing again that what Americans fear is the unknown and the coming change. All UFOs landing in USA is just showing Americans' psyche. Yeah, that's because remember, right? Whenever someone says, "Oh, how can it be that 100 people saw the same thing and it must be real?" No, 100 people can all hallucinate the same thing easily. It's not hard. It's really simple. Doing it today, you're seeing it now. Everyone you talk to who is like, "Well, we need evidence about Hunter Biden. We haven't seen the evidence yet." Well, whistleblowers, financial statements, clearly proof that the president is lying. Clearly, he's got mental issues. Clearly, and yet people can't see it. So anyone who tells me, "Oh, 100 people saw it, it must be true. They all saw it at the same time." Let me tell you that I've seen many times in my life 100 people hallucinate the same thing all at once. It happens all the time, like regularly, especially if they're being prompted to hallucinate that thing. Very simple, very easy, even. It's the norm. It was my one problem with the Robert Malone theory. Remember when he started with the mass formation psychosis? Remember all that talk? Oh, everyone was talking about mass formation psychosis. Excuse me, but this is not new. This was the operating system. This didn't just come up with COVID. It had always been the way. COVID was just another time of it, right? But it had been around forever, right? Anyone who was asking these questions was already part of that. So there you go. All right, team. That's all I got. Let's see. I got a couple more here. It turned into the beast system. Yeah. Well, and that's what I say about the beast system. People, everyone worried about this fucking orb WorldCoin thing, right? Guess what, guys? Y'all signed up for your social security number years ago. All right. Like, don't give me that shit. You're already down this road, right? You're already way down it. Signing up for WorldCoin orb. I mean, look, I didn't sign up for it. I'm not telling anyone else to sign up for it. I'm not into it. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's just a waste of everyone's time. I wouldn't sign up for shitty food. I'm not signing up for shitty money. I'm not lining up for shitty money. But I don't think it's like evil and mark of the beast. The mark of the beast was here. It's been around for a long time. You try and do business in America without a social security number and see what happens, right? You can't. So when anyone tells me, "Oh, this new technology is going to enslave us," stop. Mass formation psychosis. It happened many years ago. Stop. We've been living, I tell this to all the eschatologists. Found an amazing new word yesterday. Amazing. Let me share it with you, and then that'll be the last thing, because this is what we're at. Oh, Bitcoin graffiti, you are going to love this word. You are going to love this word. It's going to be your new favorite word. It was coined by J.R.R. Tolkien. So some people, it's one of the beautiful things about the English language, by the way. We can invent new words all the time. And you've never heard this word before, I don't think. It's called a eucatastrophe. Not a catastrophe, a eucatastrophe. And a eucatastrophe is a sudden turn of events in a story which ensures the protagonist does not meet some terrible, impending, and very plausible and probable doom. The writer Tolkien coined the word, affixing the Greek prefix EU, meaning good, to catastrophe. So Bitcoin is a eucatastrophe. It's a eucatastrophe, right? And that's what we're headed for. We're headed for a eucatastrophe. EU catastrophe. Hey, that's a good one. EU catastrophe. Maybe I will make a title out of that at some point. But but that's where we're headed, right? That's where we're headed. Yeah. Wilson called it reality tunnels, same as mass formation. Yeah. CK says mass formation psychosis has been the operating system. Yeah, that's what it's at. That's it. Like that. My only problem with the Robert Malone thing when it came out, I was like, it just cringed me every time. Did you hear about mass formation psychosis? Right? Well, yeah. You mean the world we live in? So we're getting out of it. So that's the good news. That's the good news. All right. Eucatastrophe coming our way, guys. Bitcoin it will flop. Exactly. It's going to flop. I mean, who cares about a flopping coin, right? But again, remember what we talked about the last show? I find it amazing. And I even put one more little coincidence to it, right? You get the alt man, right? That's more simulation winking, right? The alt man money, right? This is the design is destiny theme we had today. Alt man, right, is that money. Then you get the Fed man. Well, if that's alt man, then that's control man, right? That was the control man, right? Fed man, control man. So Fed man, control man, Fed man, alt man. Then the X man, which was the Dogecoin, right? Was so we were talking about Fed Now. Everything came live this week, by the way. Fed Now came live. WorldCoin Altman's money. So the Altman money, the AI guy's money, the Fed money, right? That's the control money. So control, alt, and then the X money was delete, X, delete, right? So control, alt, delete, right? I loved it. Control, alt, delete. And Bitcoin is the oldest of all of these systems. Believe it or not, Bitcoin is now the oldest money that's being put forward in this competition between Elon Musk, WorldCoin, and FedNow, right? It's hilarious, right? Hilarious. So I think we're going to win. I think we're going to win. All right, team, that's all I got for today. I appreciate everyone. We got a catastrophe coming, and things are going to be great. Peace, everyone.